Georgia. We've talked about it very briefly before in the context of potentially what could happen after the Ukraine conflict. And certainly these elections certainly do seem to predict maybe the direction that Georgia is possibly going to go in. Um, as much as I do really want Georgia to become a very sort of more pro Western country, to finally sort of throw off the shackles of sort of Russia, um, become a far, far, far more democratic state. I think it would be very, very good for the region as a whole to have this sort of democratic bastion supported again by the West, by things like security promises. If it was of be able to be in NATO, then that would help. In fact, one of the articles we're going to go through, it's a bit of a long article, but one of the things that does bring up, they bring up this guy who lived in Tbilisi, and he's talking about I remember the war. I understand why all these young people are wanting to vote to be more Western, to be more European, but we border Russia. We do not border France. We border all these countries that if we became like this, we would be invaded. And you can see the mindset of some people who instantly they want to be, more free. They want to be more democratic. They want to be more like Western European countries, but they can't because of who's on their border. Because they know if they do something Putin doesn't like, you're going to get invaded, or they're going to sort of seriously start interfering in your country. As I keep on saying, you cannot continuously allow countries like Russia to get away with this, because there's a serious problem, I'd say, certainly in Germany, where you've got two main parties who are like, well, nah, just let Putin get on with it, with what he's doing. And you're like, well, how much interference then could potentially happen in Germany? And it does start to open up a very, very worrying can of worms for a whole range of reasons along areas. But yeah, Georgia, I've said before, potentially and would be, I think, after Ukraine, um, certainly next to Moldova, one of Putin's targets. Why not just go in and take it completely? Um, Especially since the guy who potentially being elected has come out and pretty much said, "Yeah, I'm going to turn Georgia into a one-party state. Any opposition leaders, judges, etc., we're going to brand them as traitors, and we're going to have them in a Nuremberg-style trial, against them." Make no mistake, this election probably represents the direction that Georgia is going to go in. And I unfortunately don't think it might go in a good direction, which is very, very sad. But that is just the unfortunate state that the country is in. And it is very, very, very sad to see it go in this way. But again, who knows? Maybe the electorate will will keep this guy out. So we go over to here, but before we do that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. All those links down below. Also, links down below, buy me coffee, Patreon page, YouTube thank you button, etc. All those down below. Thank you very much to everyone who does support the channel. So, Georgians are now heading to the critical polls in a very critical moment in election that could now determine whether one of the most pro-Western former Soviet states will now veer towards more authoritarianism, towards a Russia-aligned path. For the past 3 decades, Georgia, a country of 3.6 million people, nestled now in the Caucasus Mountains, has maintained a very strong pro-Western aspirations, with polls showing up to 80% of its residents favor joining the EU. So it just goes to show you that that's not going to go away. Like, if you have polls in Georgia saying 80% want to join the EU, that they want these more, pro-democratic, movements. If this guy gets in and starts doing this stuff, it's going to lead to conflict. And who's going to come and help in that conflict? Because time and time again, as Russia has shown, well, if you've got a problem, if you're, looking at being overthrown, well, use my army. It will come in and put down protesters, whatever. But that comes at a price, and most of that price tends to be ceding more control to Russia, pretty much becoming a puppet and or client state in the form of, like I say, Lukashenko, perfect example. Could that now be the fate of Georgia? Sadly, it potentially might look like it, depending how these elections go. In recent years, however, the government led by the populist Georgian Dream Party has now increasingly shifted away from the West in favor of Russia, showing reluctance now to condemn Moscow for its invasion of Ukraine. The parliamentary elections are now seen by many as the most important since the independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. Skovia Kanicha, I think that's how you say her name, the director of the Jordan Institute of Politics, said that this is now a watershed moment that will determine whether the country becomes now a sovereign democracy integrated with the West or falls back into the Russian sphere of influence, he said. So you can see it's a very, very, very tense election. I would not be surprised if there's a violence after this, depending which way this goes. Long-time observers do obviously stress that these elections should be seen through a broader lens than just a geopolitical tussle between Russia and the West, with the country's now future hanging in the balance. Thomas Dewell, a senior fellow with Carnegie Europe and an expert on the region, said, "What is at stake here is Georgian democracy. This is the real risk that the country now becomes a one-party state. The Georgian Dream Party has been pretty open about the direction it wants to go." The GD, which has been in power since 2012, was founded by the shadowy billionaire Bizarva Ivskis, I think that's how you say it, who made his fortune in Russia in the 1990s, but is viewed by many friends and foes alike as Georgia's most powerful figure, even though he has not held public office for more than a decade. In recent weeks, though, Ivashish and his allies have now vowed to ban all major opposition parties and remove all opposition lawmakers after the elections, labeling them criminals and traitors. Yeah, I think that pretty much does signal which way they're going to go if this guy wins. I mean, you can't get pretty much straight becoming full authoritarian by just going, yeah, we're banning all major opposition parties, all opposition lawmakers, and then labeling them criminals and terrorists. Now, one of the big reasons why this might be happening, by the way, is that Georgia was one of the few countries that was very open to Russian exiles who, when this war started, made a beeline to Georgia because they knew that was one of the few countries where they could go. So don't be surprised if, all of a sudden Russian police start turning up and around Georgia, arresting all these people, or Georgian authorities start rounding all these people up and then, send them back into the waiting arms, probably of the Russian army. It would not surprise me if that would also happen. So, of course, during a very rare public rally on Wednesday in central Tbilisi, Ivanish now doubled down on his pledge, having now to earlier to hold a Nuremberg trial of members of the UNM, the main opposition party. The UNM was founded by Georgia's former president, Mikhail Shelvikish, who was currently out in prison on charges of abuses of power that his allies say are now politically motivated. The GD's central campaign message has been choose peace, not war, implying that the opposition would pull Georgia into a Ukraine-style conflict, while their leadership can ensure peace and stability. Splashy billboards for the party have been sprung up across the capital, featuring messages now of bombed-out Ukrainian churches, sports arenas, and contrasting them with our peaceful images from Georgia. So it's very, very obvious. And I would say that is not a good way to sort of run an election. That is almost a direct threat of violence. That if you decide, if you are a sovereign country and you decide to go in this direction, which another country doesn't like, people are going to say, oh, but what about this country doing this as well? I don't agree with them doing that either. But this is about sovereign countries making their own decisions and being able to make their own decisions without another country like Russia coming in and just saying, well, you chose that decision, But here's my army just to take all that away and replace all your leaders. Which is, bear in mind what the whole invasion of Ukraine was all about. It was to replace Zelensky. They had I can't remember the guy. Is it Yushchenko, the former Ukrainian president who did a runner um, after he got voted out after that after the Euromaidan. He was positioned by Putin in Belarus to basically be able to just insert him in after taking Kiev. You know, I mean, it's sad. It really is sad that a country like this is going to be forced to go in this direction, because that's what's going to happen if the Georgian Dream Party loses this election. They will call Russian. They will say interference. They cheated, and it's very likely they will not step down or even stand down should they win. And then, well, to be honest, if there was to be a civil war and that other side were to call for Russian aid, would that Russian aid actually arrive? Would it turn up? Because as we've seen, everything is now on the border of Ukraine. And I've asked this question before: if there were to be, problem in Dagestan, Chechnya, maybe something like Georgia, Belarus or another country that were to call that has relied on the Russian military to keep them in power, would they be able to do anything? Would they be actually able to come to a country's aid? Probably not. Probably not. As it was shown between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Russia was like the international peacekeeping forces, and yet Azerbaijan killed Russian soldiers. Russia did nothing. There was no Russian response. There was no bombing campaign. There was no stern message or anything like that. Azerbaijan just walked in and took that territory. And yet Armenia had security guarantees from Russia, and Russia did nothing. Could we be seeing maybe another situation like this happen if there is like conflict break out, that they maybe the Georgia Dream Party calls for Russian aid to help put down this coup or revolution? Who knows? But yeah, this is, I think, a very sad direction for a country to go in, especially when so many of the people there, as you can see, want to be part of the European Union. 80%, that's not going to go anywhere. Those aspirations are still going to remain. And unfortunately, it looks like they're going to go, well, again, fingers crossed. But even then, do they stand down if they don't get the result they like? So, yeah, we might end up talking more about Georgia in the near future. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.